What is up, guys? Team Feels here today with another video. This is going to be the second installment in what I'm going to call my Salamangreat series, because I think that every deck that I do now for profiles, it's going to start with the profile, and then I'm going to go in depth with how to play the deck, because I feel it's kind of important. I have a pretty wide knowledge of most decks that are either relevant or decks that would be considered rogue, because let's be realistic, that's basically the way that it works. I don't really say there's a bunch of tiers. It's either relevant or it's rogue. That's just basically how it is. But I figured, seeing I did a deck profile on Salad, that I could go ahead and talk a little bit about it. I have a lot of experience with this deck. I've had a pretty good amount of success with it too. I believe I mentioned in the profile that I have top 4 to regional with this deck too. Back when it came out and around the time that I topped the regional too, at that point, Gazelle was at 1 and Circle was at 1, but Stalio was still legal. But during that time frame, I don't think there was a single locals that I didn't get first place at when I played this deck. I've just had very good success. I know the deck in and out. It's very easy. It's kind of like Burning Abyss 2.0. That's what I call it. It kind of does the same thing, and I know Burning Abyss very well, so it's going to be kind of like that. But we are going to go ahead and jump into this. I'm going to show you guys kind of an updated list that I've been toying around with since I posted the deck profile a few days ago. Something that I thought was kind of neat and interesting. So before we jump into it, if you guys aren't subscribed already, make sure you go ahead and you smash that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up, and obviously turn the notification bell on too, so you know when I produce more of these really cool videos that teach you how to play decks that I'm showing off even better. So let's go ahead and take a look at a quick deck profile before we go into in-depth explanations. Okay, so we're going to start with the main deck, just so you guys can kind of get an overview here. Now, you'll see that some of this is still the same from the original deck profile, but you will see that some of it is also different. I am playing more trap cards, which I think are actually very, very important in this format, and there were certain cards that I decided to cut down, and I'm actually really liking the way this plays out. I've always been a pretty solid advocate of playing Pot of Desires in Salamangreat, because it doesn't really hurt you too much, especially seeing you can usually search your Gazelle before you do the Desires. But I've actually found that I like playing more trap cards over Desires. To me, it feels a lot better, and it helps me shut off my opponent's plays a lot more easily. So I opt to cut the Desires and play some more trap cards, as well as cut Will down to 1 from 3, I believe I had in the original profile, because I felt that it was good, but I didn't think it was completely necessary to play 3 of it, so you can dump it off of Gazelle, which you will resolve multiple times a game. But the hand trap lineup is the same. The big additions being, most of the trap cards, especially the Torrential and the Strike being comboed together. This is like the best combination ever. You flip the Torrential, your opponent tries to Herald, you strike the Herald, and then they just lose from there. Then Gozen is really good too. That way, not only against Drytron, but against a bunch of other decks as well, but against Drytron in particular, when they link off into Link Karibo, you can flip this and then they're locked into Darks, which kind of puts them in a really rough spot. They can't play as well when they're locked into that, which is very, very good. Additionally, there's a bunch of other decks that are obviously very important to hit. This is really, really, really good against Prank Kids. That's a big one. It's also pretty good against Invoked. They normal to Alistair, and then they can't link off into the Almirage or go into the Secure Gardener from there, or the Magistus link. So goes and match touch that off too. And I mean, against Tri-Brigade Zoo, it can be pretty good as well. So there's or just Tri-Brigade in general, it can be pretty good. So there are definitely a few decks that this comes up against that are very, very relevant. So keep in mind, this card's fantastic. And we're playing 1 Rage, 1 Roar, because we're not playing Desires. So that was another big thing. Once I cut the Desires, I realized I can get rid of cards that I don't need to play 3 copies of, because I wasn't worried about banishing them anymore. But I think that overall, the entirety of the main deck is very simple, it's very straightforward, and it provides you with the materials to not only go first, but go second, because the Torrential and Strike package, you will actually use a lot, even if you go second, because you can set them and then when it goes back to your opponent's turn, they're probably going to have to summon at least one more time to kill you. So you just flip the torrential, and then they try and negate, and you flip the strike, and then they can't play, and their entire board is gone, which is pretty sweet. That's actually a fantastic thing that you can do. So keep that in mind, that play right now. I think this is like the best trap combination if you could open up torrential and strike. But as I mentioned before, the Gozen has a lot of implications too, and it really doesn't hurt your deck because you don't have to like leave your fire attributes. You can stay within your fire attributes with Salad and still perfectly function. Like, the deck functions absolutely fine even with Gozen match up. It doesn't destroy your strategy whatsoever. You can still do a bunch with Heat Leo that you know, alters your opponent's monster's attack stats, so that's actually really important to keep in mind. If you feel like this is a very weird card for you to play, you can play Rivalry of Warlords in place of it. That's obviously up to you, but it is an option that you can go with. But everything else should look pretty standard. I'm not going to go over a lot because I did a lot in the profile, but we'll kind of get into the test hands, because I want to do a lot of test hands. I don't do those kind of videos very often, but I want to show test hands, so I show you guys how to actually play the deck, what I would do in certain situations, and boards that you can end on depending on the scenario. So we're going to go ahead and hop on into that and take a look at essentially what goes through my mind whenever I play Salamangreat in a tournament or other event. I completely forgot to mention the fact that we'd also be discussing the extra deck and side deck. That's actually something I wanted to go over. The extra deck is exactly the same as it was in the profile. Nothing has changed from it, I don't think. All of it should be identical to what it was. I think that the extra deck is just fantastic the way that it is. I don't think anything needs to change in the first place on it, because it does what it's supposed to do, which obviously is what you want out of it. You want it to just function the way that it should function. But moving over to the side deck, you can see that there are some changes. I'm playing 3 Lightning Storm. I finally grabbed my third one. I know there's a reprint coming out, but I actually like the original set, first edition, so I wanted to get my third copy. And then the different dimension ground is fantastic, as I've mentioned before, because once you establish your board, like if you establish your board with this and a torrential tribute set, you flip this, and then when you torrential your opponent later in the turn, you can use your Balinks to avoid your Salamangreat destruction, so all of your Salamangreat cards still stay on the board, and then your opponent just loses their entire field, which is absolutely bonkers, really, really bonkers. The Solemn Judgments, I think, are really important to discuss a little bit, because there are going to be times where you need to go first and you need to put cards in that aren't something like different dimension ground, and you say, okay, I need something to stop, you know, evenly matched, or I need something to stop lightning storms or Harpy's Feather Duster, and Judgment is going to help you. Obviously you can search your roar, your rage, all that other stuff. Roar is obviously going to be the big one because it's going to be another negation, but that's only one card. You'd rather have more cards to try and negate cards on the board that your opponent is going to utilize to try and clear your back row, because we are playing a good chunk of back row. And Judgment definitely does that for you. You can play cards like Imperial Order if you want to. I didn't have space to do so, but that's okay. Obviously you can find space. Forbidden Droplet is a big one. I think that Forbidden Droplet is so important because it cuts off a lot of cards like Winda, it cuts off Herald, all this other stuff that normally would be difficult to negate. You have Forbidden Droplet to basically supplement your deck strategy in that of putting cards into the graveyard and being able to just break your opponent's board. And then lastly, the Ally of Justice Cycle Reader is obviously for Drytron. We've discussed the amount of things that we need to counter Drytron, and Ally of Justice definitely does that for us. I don't really have to go super in depth with that because everyone already knows how that works. So that is basically the side deck and the extra deck. We're going to go over one more thing towards the end of the video as far as like substitutions go and other strategies, but first let's go ahead and jump in and do some test hands. Alrighty, so hopefully this camera angling looks pretty good. I'm toying around with my camera. As some of you may know, I use my phone to record and edit everything that I do on my channel. Everything is done actually pretty quickly, believe it or not. And usually it only takes one take unless I somehow trip over my speech enough or I just sound terrible, which depending on the day I can sound terrible. But we're going to be doing some test hands. I've already mixed this up a bit, so it should be pretty good. we're going to do, I don't know how many test hands we'll do. We'll just do enough to kind of display my thought process and hopefully show you guys how to play this deck properly. Uh-oh, I might have just split a sleeve. Did I split a sleeve? Maybe not. Oh, let me double check. Nope, I'm good. Must have just been my imagination. But we will go ahead and just give this a couple more cuts here so it's extremely mixed up. And then we'll just draw a test hand. We'll put this up here and we'll start with 5. Let's see, that's 5 there. Perfect. So we're starting with a pretty good hand from the start. This is actually fantastic. This is going to help us play basically our entire board the way that we want it to. The fact that we drew 2 Gozen, we can sign at mining one of the Gozen matches away, which will grab us, of course, our best card here, our Gazelle. It's pretty darn good. Now, normally, you would use like the Foxy without its effect. You would just summon it because the Spinny is never guaranteed, but seeing we have the Spinny, we can use Foxy's effect. And we look at the top 3 cards, which we're going to hit a Sanctuary, a Rage, and a Mining. We're going to grab the Rage, because obviously we don't want the Sanctuary. That would not be good at all. I'm not going to shuffle yet because we're just going to link this off for Balinks. And then it'll be Balinks as Chainlink 1 and Gazelle as Chainlink 2. So this will summon itself, and then we'll just get the Sanctuary that was there. Gazelle's effect will then trigger to dump a card, and we're going to dump our Roar because we already have the Rage in hand. So now we have both traps set up. From here, we're going to discard the Spinny to boost either one of these, doesn't matter. The Spinny's then going to summon itself back. We'll overlay these 2. I'm going to make the Stalio. Stalio's effect will detach the Gazelle, even though it doesn't really matter because you're going to link summon with all the materials anyways. So we're going to summon a Jaguar from deck. Then from here, we can link these off into a Sunlight Wolf right here. And we have a couple of options of things we can do, but I'm going to show you guys something that I've been doing a lot lately, and I think that this play is very important. So we link the Jaguar for a Balinks. That'll trigger the Sunlight Wolf to get the Gazelle back to hand. Then we activate the Sanctuary. We go ahead and we do the Reincarnation Summon in the opposite zone. And then we do the Jaguar by shuffling back the Mirage Stalio. So now our Stalio's back in extra deck as if we never lost it. And then we're going to link both of these off. And we're going to make Nightmare Phoenix. We also get the effect to add a Roar back to hand. So we're ending on a Rage for a pop of 2, a Roar for an Omni Negate, a Gozen to lock them, and these 2 monsters currently can't be destroyed by battle because they're co-linked under Phoenix's effect, and we have our Gazelle back in hand. So that's a really, really good hand. That's fantastic. This is ideal. Your opponent is probably going to struggle to play through this. Really, really good hand. Absolutely fantastic. Let's go ahead and mix these cards up and jump on into another one. Alrighty, we're going to do test hand number 2. Test hand number 1 was pretty good. We'll see how number 2 goes. I really want to be able to showcase different combos, but if it ends up being the same combo every turn, I'm also not going to be upset because it shows consistency, and that's very, very important. I want consistency in all of my decks, almost more than anything else. That's one of the most important parts to me, is doing the same thing as much as possible. Okay, that's pretty darn busted. This is really, really good. This is probably better than the first hand. So we normal summon the Buffalo. We link for the Balinks. Buffalo Chainlink 1, Balinks Chainlink 2. Search for, yeah, I'm sorry. No, never mind. I'm one step ahead of myself. So we search the Sanctuary. I'm going to shuffle this because we're going to be drawing If we were just searching again, I wouldn't shuffle it, but seeing we are drawing, we definitely need to mix this up. Oops. Mix this up a bit more, because that would be a good idea. Alrighty. And then we discard the Spinny from the Buffalo's effect to draw 2. We get a Torrential and a Foxy. That's pretty good. The Torrential and the Strike are ridiculous, actually. So after the Spinny gets discarded, we get to activate the Gazelle, and then Gazelle's effect is going to dump. And in this instance, I'm going to opt to send the Roar. So that gets mixed up. Toss that back there. We trigger the Spinny Engrave to summon itself, and then we're going to go ahead and do our standard line of play, which would be to summon a Stalio. Stalio effect, detaching the Gazelle. We'll then summon our homeboy, Jack Jaguar, wherever he is in here. There he is. Jaguar comes out. Perfect. There's a cut. We then link the Stalio and the Balinx, as we've done prior, to make a Sunlight Wolf. From here, we link the Jaguar into another Balinx. The Sunlight Wolf triggers to add the Gazelle back. Then we activate the Sanctuary, link the Sunlight Wolf for another Sunlight Wolf by reincarnating. And then we do our Jaguar to shuffle the Mirage Stalio back. Then we can link these two, and we can make our Nightmare Phoenix right there. We also get the effect of our Sunlight Wolf to add the Roar back to hand. So when we set all 3 of these, we now have 3 interruptions on field. Additionally, we can't be destroyed by battle, but the Torrential would obviously change that because the Phoenix will go, but the Sunlight Wolf will stay. We also have an Ash in hand, we have a Fox in hand, and we have our Gazelle in hand too. So next turn is definitely going to be an OTK with Access Code Talker. So I'm actually going to show like the line of play and what would happen here. That way you guys get an idea. Let's say we utilize the Ash on something that they play. They start going through plays, we Torrential them, they try and negate, we strike, and then everything resolves. When the Sunlight Wolf would be destroyed, we banish the Balinx, so the Sunlight Wolf stays. It's not an activation, it's just a condition, so you don't have to worry about like chaining this to strike. It's just a condition of a card. This all goes to graveyard because it all resolves. And then we still have a negation with Roar if they try and keep playing, which they probably won't because they won't have much to do. And then it comes back to us. We draw, oh my god, we draw we draw Soul Charge, which is even better. So this is just ridiculous how good this hand is. So we would normal summon probably to the zone that the Sunlight Wolf points to. That way we could add back our Ash Blossom, which is pretty good. And then at the same time, we also get the effect of Foxy to reveal the top 3, which we hit a Spinny off the top, which we'll grab that because we can definitely utilize it. We'll go ahead and shuffle that up. We can now link this if we want to. For me personally, I would definitely grab the Roar back to hand first from the Sunlight Wolf, and then we can activate Will. And then we can tribute the Will, targeting this, seeing it was reincarnated. We can bring back our Jack Jaguar, and we can bring back a Spinny. From here, I'm going to link these two, and we're going to make an Update Jammer. We can then link the Spinny and the Update Jammer, and we can make Transcode. Transcode will bring back the update. We'll link these two off, make the access code Update Jammer Chainlink 1, access code Chainlink 2 to target the transcode. That way they can't respond. And then after that, we have 1, 2 pops at the minimum, actually 3 at the minimum, because you definitely banish the Phoenix because you're not going to ever get it back. So we have 3 pops that we can go through there, which is fantastic. Additionally, we did not use the Gazelle effect to summon itself. So if they were to, let's say, Nibiru you could still special summon the Gazelle, which is very important. So we're assuming obviously that they didn't Nibiru us. But if they did, and all of these 3 1, 2, and 3. We're still in the graveyard, and they debuted us here. That's perfectly fine, because then you just use the Gazelle afterwards to special itself. Gazelle will dump, and you'll actually send Falco here, and I'll show why shortly. So we send the Falco. Then we use Falco's effect engrave to bounce the Gazelle to special summon this. That's actually pretty important. We can then link this for our last copy of Balinks. Then we will get the effect of Jack Jaguar, because we haven't used this yet, to shuffle back. And we can actually shuffle back a Sunlight Wolf, seeing we only have one left in our extra deck right now. So that goes back. Now from here we have a couple options. We can summon the Spinny if we want to. We could just hold on to it. It's obviously whatever you want to do. It also depends on like what your line of play is, because right now left in our extra deck we don't have an excessively large amount of things, but one thing that you definitely want to do is you want to link off the Jaguar and the Balinks for a Sunlight Wolf. If you want to keep the other one extra deck, you can, by all means. It's player preference, but I would probably keep it myself. And then you can set the Roar from there. That's assuming that they have a Nibiru, and even then at that point, if they do, now they're down a card, and you have an Omni negate and you have an Ash to negate another card. So that's a lot that could be played through, and even if they Nibiru you still got to play your entire board out and set up 2 negations essentially through the Roar and the Ash. So that's test hand number 2. Let's go ahead and go on to a third one. Okay, so test hand number 3. I've decided that I'm going to do 3 test hands in total, and then we'll move on to the other portion of the video, which is going to be me discussing other options of cards that you can play within the deck that have definite valid reasons as to why we would play them, especially like if you're looking at this from a budget player's perspective, because I know there are a good chunk of people who watch my channel that are budget players, so I try and keep that in mind too, that not everyone has the same exact budget as I do, where I can kind of just buy cards freely or trade stuff in, or just sell online and get a bunch of money in return in order to pay for new decks. But I've had all this stuff for a while for the most part, so it's not like I've gone out and just purchased it. It's stuff that I bought when I had the ability to do so, and well, some of the prices were lower at that point too. So we're gonna go ahead and do this last test hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this is interesting. This is very interesting. Now obviously I've kind of taken this from a perspective of only if we're going first, so I'm going to continue to do that, just because like going first is obviously best. Going second would be a whole entirely different discussion for this video. There are a lot of times where if your opponent sets up enough negations, I do something called I force them into a blind scoop, where I just scoop and I go to game 2 without playing any cards down, because then they don't know what I'm playing. But for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be showing you going first hands. So we're going to do our sign up mining to send the Will to grave. This is going to be definitely an interesting hand. We're going to actually add Spinny this time, which seems weird, but like the Gazelle play just isn't as powerful here. We're going to go ahead and put that in our graveyard. We normal summon the Buffalo in attack position, then we link it for our Balinks. We'll be doing Buffalo Chainlink 1 and Balinks Chainlink 2. Oh, there's Sanctuary on the bottom. Perfect. Mix this up a bit. Give it some shuffles. Perfect. And then we pitch the Spinny to draw 2 cards. We get an Imperm and another Spinny. Not fantastic, but we're going to have to make this work, right? That's the entire point. We do have a good amount of interruptions, so this actually isn't a bad hand. We special the Spinny out. We're going to go ahead and link it with the Balinks for our Sunlight Wolf. Then we can activate Sanctuary, and this is actually something that I think is kind of important. We're actually going to reincarnate the Sunlight Wolf for another one, and then we'll use the effect to add Will back. So now we have a Will in hand, which actually is pretty important for our following turns. So we want to keep that in hand, so just keep that in mind. Then we're basically going to be setting 2 cards and passing But the cool part about this is we have the Torrential with the Balinks, so we can avoid the Sunlight Wolf being destroyed, which is pretty cool. So we'll assume that we've done that. If they try and do anything else, like if they're playing Drytron, then we can obviously use the Bell to stop their grave stuff, and we have an Imperm to stop other things on field too. So we do have 3 total interruptions, one of them being a board wipe, which is pretty cool. We'll assume that we used all of them and our opponent couldn't break the board. Just for the purpose of the video, as I've said before, we draw for turn. We draw another Torrential. Not fantastic, but this still does allow us to do a decent amount of things with this hand, which is obviously important. So for me, I think that one of the best routes would be to normal summon the Spinny. Then we are going to link the Spinny for Balinks. After that, we will activate our Will. Now we have 2 options here. We can either summon the Spinny out, or we can summon the Sunlight Wolf out. Obviously, it's kind of your choice as to what you do. I would probably go with the Spinny here. If you wanted to, though, you could kind of do an earlier access code talker. I don't think it's smart to do that, though. I would summon the Spinny off of the Will. I would link these 2 for Splash Mage, and then you Splash Mage, revive the Spinny in defense. Then you can link these 2 for your transcode. You can bring back the Splash Mage with the transcode, and then you can link these off into your access code, which is going to grab you 1, 2 pops at the minimum. If you want to remove a Sunlight Wolf, you can. I personally don't like to, so we'll assume that we get 2 pops off of that, which is very, very sweet. On top of that, we also have the ability to summon back the Spinny with its own effect, which is very, very good. And then we're going to link these 2. That'll get banished for our Heat Leo, which can shuffle one of our opponent's spells and traps if we wanted to. The other cool part is, oh, I'm sorry, I actually forgot to do this. The Sunlight Wolf, when we summon the access code below it, we're supposed to add back the Buffalo. I didn't do that. So it should have been Sunlight Wolf 1 access code 2 to target the transcode, and I forgot to mention that. But that's very, very important. Don't forget that, because you want to remember that. But we can reincarnate the Heat Leo, and we can summon another one. And then when we do that, we can actually use the Heat Leo to target our Bell and 1 monster on our opponent's field, and we can make their monster's attack point 0. So swinging over it is very easy because the access code is at 53. So this is going to be 7,600 damage by itself, which is pretty good. It's pretty darn good. And then we also can set the Torrential and end our turn, because obviously 76 isn't enough to beat them. But then once again, during their turn, if we Torrential, we have a Balinks to, at the minimum, guard the Heat Leo, and chances are they're not going to be able to play through that. So we would draw for turn. Another Buffalo doesn't help us out a lot, but we have the ability to do a bunch of cool things. We can go ahead and normal summon, and we can link this, make the Balinks, the Buffalo triggers, discard the other Buffalo, draw 2 trap cards. We're drawing a lot of trap cards. We're not drawing that well, but we're countering our opponent, which is the important part. Then we can use the effect of Will to bring back something like our Sunlight Wolf, or if you wanted to bring back a Heat Leo, you could do that too. And as you can see in the extra deck, we are running a little bit low on materials. Doesn't mean that we can't play still. It's still a very, very strong position to have. So keep that in mind, that there are plenty of things that you can do to push for game. And once again, if they have a monster, you could always Heat Leo with the Bell to drop that monster's attack stats. Or the other cool thing you could do, before using Will, you can use Heat Leo to target this and target the Heat Leo, so this becomes 23, and then you can Will back this. So now you have 23, 23, and 23 on board. So that's actually pretty good too. So keep in mind, there's a million different lines of plays you can go through. But we're going to go ahead and move on to the last portion of the video, which is going to be me discussing the substitutions that you can make to this list if you'd like to make substitutions. So let's go ahead and jump right on into it. Alrighty, so we have reached basically the last portion of the video in me kind of discussing how to play Salamangreat from my perspective, and that is the portion where we discuss things that can be replaced or changed up in the deck. I'm referencing my deck personally, and I'm trying to help you guys decide if there are cards that you either want to cut, have to cut, or can't afford, and you feel like you want to switch things up. So obviously we're looking at a very large amount of cards on the table in front of us. It's not like we're looking at a little small stack of cards. We're probably looking at an extra 40 to 50 cards. And I do have another small stack of like 10 cards that I'm not going to show because some of them are duplicates and other ones are like secret text that I'm kind of working on that I really don't want to release yet until I start playing in more tournaments when the ban list actually becomes legal in a few days from now. But we're going to discuss literally everything in front of me. Every single card we're going to talk about for the most part. Some of them will be kind of similar. Some of them I won't give a large explanation because they don't need it. Some of them I will give a larger explanation. So we're going to start up in the upper left corner here. So we have Salamangreat Violet Chimera, which is the fusion, and we have the fusion spell for Salamangreat. So this is an OTK that was relevant with Mirage Stalio being legal. It's actually pretty cool. You kind of just drop your opponent's monster stats and then you swing twice, which is pretty crazy. So this card, I'm sorry, you swing for big damage. And I think that's really good from like a budget player's perspective because it gives you another alternative for an OTK that doesn't involve access code talker, because if you can't afford the access code talker, you're going to want to wait to OTK, and Violet Chimera does that, and it replaces the spot in the extra deck of access code. So keep in mind that's actually fantastic to have this card. So it's kind of a neat package, but it's more budget oriented, or if you're getting like super techie, then sure, go for it. But then we have Traptrix Rafflesia and Gravedigger's Trap Hole. So this particular package is here if you're very, very like scared of Nibiru. Some people are like horrified of Nibiru. I don't think it's going to be as big of a card this format. I think people are going to rely on things like Cycle Reader. They're going to rely on like Ghost Bell, DD Crow, like all this other stuff. So I don't expect Nibiru to be as relevant as some people may think, but it depends on where you're playing. Some locals will have more people playing Nibiru because they know there's more combo players there. Other people won't play as many Nibiru, and I think right now Sky Striker is going to be like one of the really big things. So I don't think Nibiru is going to be hurting Sky Striker very much, but you never know. Baguska is pretty good against a certain number of decks. The one in particular that always pops in my mind is Shadal Invoked, because basically everything that they're going to play out is going to go to defense position, and then they can't really do much because they can't attack. All their cards are in defense. What are they going to do? So Baguska is good for that purpose, so keep that in mind. Kita, this is a fantastic budget option, and considering so many people are playing Ash Blossom, you can just summon it back and you can make a Link 3 for free. And Link 3s for 3 are fantastic. That's just really, really good. So definitely a good budget option. Additionally, if you're on a budget, you can play a second transcode if you wanted to, just because it helps you like facilitate OTKs with like Update Jammer, or just swinging for big damage. Could get you back a Sunlight Wolf that you could like use to link off. There's obviously a million different things that you could do with that, but I won't go in depth because that would just require me doing a bunch of combos. Basically, it's there as another way to just continue progressing your board state. Then we have the Pyro Phoenix, which saw some play when this card came out. This actually was kind of popular initially on its release because it was like an entire board wipe for your opponent's board, which is very, very strong. And to be honest, I think this card got a reprint in the Megatins last year, and I think this card is like maybe $1 at most. Like I think it's less than that. You'd obviously play 2 copies, but it's a good replacement for access code because access code is expensive. And then you just find another card in the deck that you want to cut, and you cut that out. So it's definitely a strong choice, and I think a lot of people should go towards it if you're a budget player. Additionally, if you're a budget player, Topologic Zeroboros alongside Pot of Desires is fantastic. These 2 cards work wonders together. Basically, he's going to gain a ton of attack because you use Pot of Desires, and he can banish like the entire board. And it's non-targeting, so this is actually a Dragoon out, believe it or not. That's kind of important to some people. Some people freak out over Dragoon being a card. I don't worry about it because there are plenty of ways around it, but some people do freak out. Just so you know, this is an out for it, and it just outs everything else on your opponent's field on top of it. Moving on over here, we have 3 copies of Parallel Exceed. This would coincide with either the Traptrix Rafflesia or the Baguska because it's another way to make rank 4s. I personally don't play it right now because I'm not leaning towards rank 4s. I'm just trying to Mirage Stalio over and over again, so I don't even worry about it. So Parallel Exceed is an option, but for me, I don't play it. The Lady Debug is also a very good option. One of the things that I recommend everyone do is go over to Triff's channel. If you guys know who Triff is, Triff Gaming, pretty popular Yugi tuber, you know, Pendulum Best Deck, that kind of stuff. He posted a Salamangreat deck list that played basically like I think he played over 20 trap cards. I thought the deck was really, really cool and interesting. I went and I tossed the list together and did some test hands. And it does put up some really disgusting boards, which is kind of scary. You know, there were boards where I was actually ending on a Sunlight Wolf, a Nightmare Phoenix, and 5 back row, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But he was playing Debug, which I think in that list might be a little bit better, only because you're playing a smaller monster count. But in my list, I don't like this because I like to just draw cards over and over again, so I don't even worry about the debug. This one's interesting, Mathmac Edition. This is a card that, like, for a super rare is kind of expensive. They're like $5 or $6 a piece, I think. But basically it's another special summon. It's also a level 4 and it's a fire, which in this deck just synergizes. So if you need to go into a rank 4 Xyz monster, this is definitely going to be your guy for the job if you want more stuff. Also, Salamangreat Fowl does essentially the same thing, which is pretty good. You can save yourself some money by playing the Fowl over this, but if you want to play both, I would advise just playing one copy of both. You don't need multiple. Sea Archiver, if you want to play a second one. I main deck one, but if you want to play a second one just because it's another extender, go for it, but usually the one is perfect. I don't think I've ever had a complaint with how my deck runs playing just one copy. And the Dino Wrestler Pankratops, this is kind of straightforward. I feel like this doesn't need a large explanation. It's just a 2-for-1 card at the minimum, which is great, absolutely great. Now we'll move on to the cool stuff for me, which is the hand traps. You'll notice Nibiru isn't in here. I'm not playing a lot of Nibiru right now, to be perfectly honest. There are other cards that I'm prioritizing significantly more than Nibiru. I think that Artifact Lancea is obviously a fantastic card because of Tri-Zoo, Tri-Lyrilusk, all that stuff, and Invoked. Those are obviously the big decks that you're going to look at and you're going to go, okay, how am I going to stop them? And Artifact Lancea is most likely going to be your best bet. Then the Phantasme is awesome right now against Sky Striker because Sky Striker is going to be relevant. I think we're going to see a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon. I know there was a PPG event this weekend. I think they had over 100 players, and I think there were 3 Sky Strikers that made it in the top 16, which is pretty good. Obviously, a lot of people jumped over to the deck immediately when engagement back to 1. So we're going to see how everything diversifies over time and see if people kind of jump back towards decks like Drytron or more combo-based stuff, or if they stick with the more control-based decks like Sky Striker. Skullmeister, I still think this card is good. It's a really good budget option, too, because it just stops graveyard effects. That's as generic as it gets. Just stop a graveyard effect, just negate it, and they're dirt cheap, so that's like the big push. DD Crow, this card is also very important in this format, especially if you can't afford Cycle Readers. This card is an awesome substitute for Cycle Reader, and one of the big things that I always tell people is that not only is it going to hurt your Drytron opponent's graveyard, but it's also going to hurt Sky Striker now because, like, they try and add Engage back with Kagari, and you just banish the Engage. And now they don't play with Engage anymore for the rest of the game. It's gone. So DD Crow is actually really, really good. Effect Veiler, also very good budget option if you don't want to play like Imperms or something, because Imperms do get expensive. Granted, they have a lot of reprints, so they're not as expensive, but Ash Blossom also climbed up in price. So if you want to play on more of a budget, then obviously Veiler is really good, especially against like Tri-Brigade Zoo or Lyrilusk, whichever one you think is going to be relevant for your particular locals. But I think that Veiler just has a very, very strong application in the meta, and that's why I consider it to be a fantastic budget option. And lastly, we have Droll. Droll is awesome against so many decks. Obviously, Drytron is the big one, but also like Invoked, because if they do the Meltdown, after they do that, you can drop the Droll, and sure, they have Alistair, but if they don't have Invocation, now they can't Fusion Summon. So Droll definitely is awesome. Like I said, against Drytron, and it's also really, really good. There's a plethora of decks that this card is good against. It's also good against Striker, which is another card that's good against Striker. So keep that in mind. Then we'll move on to the bottom portion here. 3 Rivalry. I mentioned this in the first portion of the video where we looked at my updated list. We took a quick overview of it, and I said that if you're feeling like, you know, Gozen is a little weird, that you could play Rivalry instead of Gozen. It's going to be, instead of attributes, it's going to be types, which might be a little better for you if you really want to hit those access code OTKs. But a lot of the decks that are going to be floating around are probably going to be the same type. I don't see a lot of like different type decks popping up other than like maybe Prank Kids and maybe some like Shadal Invoke stuff having a couple different cards on field. But I think that this is still a good option. You could play more Rages and more Roars if you want to. I only play the one of each because I'm not playing Desires. If I was playing Desires, I'd probably up my counts to at least 2 Rage and maybe a second Roar, but I usually only play 1 Roar. Then lastly, Imperial Order. This can also be cards like Anti-Spell Fragrance. If you know your opponent is playing a very spell-heavy lineup, aka Sky Strikers, that's going to be the big one, then you can play Imperial Order or Anti-Spell Fragrance, and that should hopefully cut them off so they can't really play the game that well, and they just kind of struggle to get their entire engine going because they have too many spell cards in their hand and not enough monsters to actually function. But that essentially brings the entirety of this educational Salamangreat video to a close. I hope I went in depth with most of my explanations and I was able to give you guys some useful information. Oh, I actually didn't go over the spells. I completely skipped over these. I'm sorry. So that's not actually the end of the video. So the Desires we already discussed, with the Zero-Boros being really good, and it's just a draw 2, which is good. Dark Ruler is really good if you're replacing Forbidden Droplet. Because Forbidden Droplet is really expensive, so if you replace that because you can't afford it, Dark Ruler is definitely a good option, and you can still clear the board. You may not OTK because they can't take damage, but you will at least clear their board, which is awesome. 3 Twin Twisters substitutes for the Lightning Storm, and so does the Feather Duster. That way you don't have to pay for Lightning Storms because they are expensive. And then Wills, because it's more soul charges. If you're playing Desires, I would play more Will, but I'm not playing Desires, so I don't even worry about it. But that hopefully explains everything in here. That brings the actual video to a close rather than me forgetting to mention a whole section of cards. But hopefully that was very, very informative and you guys learned something from this. I love doing videos like this where I can show people how to play the decks. It's obviously easier to sit there and practice and learn as you play more and more games. That's something that you're going to have to do anyways, but I figure giving my personal insight as to how everything functions can be helpful too, because some people need that little extra bit of information and explanation. But like I said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on so you know when I upload really cool long videos like this where you get to hear me talk for like 45 minutes. And for right now, this is Team Yugi Feels signing out.